Panel now this Monday, Bruce Hawker, Labor Alliance strategist from Campaign and Communications, with me in the Sky News Centre, and Grahame Morris to join us shortly from Barton Deakin, the former Chief of Staff to John Howard. Bruce Hawker, first to you. Labor votes consolidated at 36%. I said at the start of the program, this gives the Prime Minister breathing space, not just against the coalition, but those hoping to undermine her from within the ALP as well.
I think it's a very strong result for the government. If it's 50-50 as the news poll suggests, then Tony Abbot has got a lot to answer for to his constituency and to his party, because in many ways what I think we've seen in the last few weeks has been his complete mishandling of a whole raft of issues, which is culminating in this very bad number for the opposition.
Grahame Morris is in our Sydney studio. Grahame, how concerned will the Liberals be if Bruce has said that Tony Abbot will have a lot to answer for if this is where things are at? Looks like news polls suggesting it's even Stevens. How concerned are the Liberals at that number?
Yeah, it's certainly this morning people were a bit flat, and I suspect tomorrow's party room will be a bit flat. But as we all know, polls are bouncing around, and we've just seen one, which is completely the opposite to news poll. And look, there is no doubt that there has been a closing of the polls. Whether or not it's 50-50 or the coalition is still in front, I don't think it matters much, is we are getting back to somewhere near normal. But I really do think all of this frenetic activity of the Prime Minister in recent times has been all about cooking those polls, not because of Tony Abbot or the coalition or anyone. It's all about getting past the killing season of leaders at Christmas time and making sure her poll numbers were terrific so that the Kevin Rudd push is dead, and she's done that absolutely brilliantly. And I think it's just as well Kevin Rudd's cat died last week, or would have got a big kicking this morning.
He loves that cat.
I'm not laughing at that. I refuse to laugh at it. Let's go to the Foreign Minister, Bob Carr. I want to play a comment from the Foreign Minister on lunchtime agenda with Ashley Gillen. In commenting on Kevin Rudd and his response to the Maxine McKew book, let's first of all play Bob Carr's comments.
Trish.
We don't have it there, my apologies. We'll get it for you in a moment. Bruce Hawker, let's preempt the comment. We'll play it for our viewers in a moment. But Kevin Rudd essentially said that everyone needs to be honest about what happened a couple of years ago. It was a very pointed comment made to the Nine Network on the way into Canberra today. Is that really the response he should have given the numbers of 50-50? Doesn't it look petulant? It won't go down well with the caucus, will it?
Well, I think there's still some questions unanswered about what happened on the night of the coup back in 2010. Having said that, I think he's made it pretty clear, though, that we do need to move on past what happened back then and concentrate on the main foe in this case, which is the opposition, certainly not within the Labor Party. But one of the things that came out of that book was some conflicting stories apparently about who was shown what research and when. I think it'll probably just be relegated to history now, but it'd be good if we could just have that issue sorted out so we can move on and it doesn't become an unanswered question.
Well, let's play that comment that Bob Carr gave Ashley Gillen on lunchtime agenda.
No, I don't think he should shut his mouth. I think he should talk out about the things that we find interesting, and that is Australia's foreign policy. And having him talk about China, about the United States, would be more relevant than overanalyzing the events of 2 years ago. I think the country's moved on, and the country wants this government and politicians in Canberra to talk about its future.
Bruce Hawker, if the primary vote today was 28 as opposed to 36, things would be different. We'd be having a very different discussion, wouldn't we?
Well, we may well be. However, of course, in the past, in the not-so-distant past, Labor's vote has been down in that 28-30 region. So, the caucus has found in itself a strong resolution to stick with the team that they've got there and to see it through. I think that's fantastic. But the one thing I do think we should be very conscious of is that a lot of the problems I think that the Liberal Party have right now could be solved just by removing Tony Abbot from the leadership. Everything we've seen in the last few weeks where their polling has gone down has been referable to his very deeply conservative social attitudes, the big debate about misogyny and sexism, his failure to disconnect or disassociate himself from Alan Jones's comments and so forth. So I don't think we should fool ourselves that we haven't got a long way to go yet, particularly if the Liberal Party were to change its leader, which I think is possibly on the cards at some stage in the not-so-distant future, given his high unpopularity. We've seen it with previous opposition leaders. When their unpopularity ratings get up into the 50s and high 50s as they are with him, then you've got a real problem on your hands. And I think that's what's happened with the electorate. They were in the past were able to say, look, a lot of these attitudes of Tony Abbot's that we've talked about in the election in 2010, he was able to dispatch to the past. But in recent times, he's been reassociating himself with them through these really loose comments that he's been making, including just last week when he started talking about the Labor Party, i.e. Julia Gillard, being inexperienced when it comes to children. Yeah.
OK, well, let's play you. I want to play you a question and Mr Abbott's answer at a news conference. It was at a business in Hume here in Canberra. Mr Abbott had been there about a year ago, but since then his polling has dropped away from about a 10-point or a 12-point lead to now even when it comes to the two-party basis.
You were here a year ago and saying pretty much the same things, and in that time you've been 12 and 10 points ahead, two-party between in the polls. It's now 50-50. Isn't this wearing a bit thin? Isn't it time to change the conversation and talk about what you'll do and get a bit of policy out?
Look, every day we are talking about what we are going to do to make it easier for the Australian people, and I keep reiterating day in, day out, if you want lower taxes, better services, stronger borders and modern infrastructure, vote for the coalition.
That was Mark Riley from Channel 7 asking Mr Abbott whether it's time to get some more policy out. Grahame Morris, Nikki Sava, a former advisor to the coalition during the long period of Mr Peter Costello as Treasurer, had a similar message to Tony Abbott last week and also said that Mr Abbott needs to rewire his head to his mouth, following on from Bruce Hawker's analysis that he's been a bit loose with his language after many months of discipline. Is it time to be a bit more positive, to try and frame the debate a bit more, Grahame?
Yeah, it is. And there's been a couple of opportunities that have been missed. But look, they will come. And you know, all of this stuff will be fresh when Tony Abbott releases all the material. And look, just back on Maxine's book and leadership. Yeah, Kieran, you and I did that marathon live television exercise for 5 hours the night of the leadership coup. And to me, it was painfully obvious that there was no one driving it. There was no pre-plan. There were no grown-ups to stop it. It was just momentum got rolling and nobody was able to stop it. And I think that part of Maxine's book is just written through Maxine-coloured glasses. That you know, she was a Kevin fan and her hero got knocked off. But the idea that Prime Minister Gillard was planning this for 6 months or something just doesn't smell true, because that night was a complete mess. And I suspect I've talked to more Labor people than has Maxine. And to most of them, it was a huge surprise and a huge shock that night, the way it unfolded. But there was nobody who could stop the ball rolling, and all of a sudden Kevin Rudd's gone. But it's not because there was some great plan. It was because there were no grown-ups there to stop it.
So, Grahame, just getting back to your initial comment, though, in terms of Tony Abbott, to switch to another gear, what does he need to do, in your opinion?
Look, it's a mixture. You will still have back-end loaded policy releases closer to the election. But between now and then, there needs to be a few directional speeches, this I believe sort of thing. And there will be a time and a place, but they've got to be big set-piece things. You know, all of that stuff yesterday about Australia in the Asian century, Tony Abbott and Andrew Robb said all of that back in June. All of the guts of it, Andrew Robb, Tony Abbott said in June. But it's hard for an opposition to break through unless they're really big set pieces. And I suspect that's what Tony and his colleagues have got to do next, is think of just just do a couple of big events with very big set-piece speeches so that they can cut through some of this media clutter.
Can I say this? Well, I think one of the...
Yeah, well, Bruce, I want to get, you could get your response on that as well. I want to ask you, though, it was good timing, wasn't it, from... the Prime Minister's office has copped a lot of flack, but the timing of that was a good one because it gave her the opportunity to talk about something and sort of have the moral high ground as opposed to being caught up in the latest round of leadership talk through the McKew book.
I think it gave her a real opportunity to present herself as a Prime Minister, and that's something which you should never pass up. And unfortunately, Tony Abbot, constantly passes that opportunity up. And I think that's what I was going to say about the approach that he's consistently taken in the past. In a sense, I think he's had a pact with the power brokers in the Liberal Party, which goes along these lines. Look, I will do everything to drive down the government's vote, and in doing so, I'll probably drive my own vote down. But I want you to support me, and I'm going to be a Prime Minister in waiting who's somewhat different to the sort of Prime Minister that you would have had in the past. I'm more out of the DLP mould than the Liberal Party mould, but live with that, and I'll get you there, even though I'll probably take some skin off myself on the way through. What's happened, though, is that he's taken the skin off himself and the Liberal Party's vote has dropped. That's a really bad combination of events for him to have to be dealing with. And if I were him, I'd be sleeping very uneasily right now.
Graham, we've only got 40 seconds left. Just quickly, your final thoughts on that?
Well, look, part of that was true. The rest of it was piffle. But it seems to me the two leaders are fighting each other to a standstill, and people can see that. And at the moment, you wouldn't say that either leader is sort of flavour of the month. But people see them, and people don't like this contest. But it's reality in Australian politics nowadays.
Grahame Morris, Bruce Hawker, gents, have a good evening. Thanks for that.
Thank you.